Welcome to the Propreneur Podcast, where we help practice owners become better entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Dino Watt. And welcome once again, everybody, to the Propreneur Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in every single week as we release the best practices that we can for you from our experts and from our professionals. And today is a professional day that we get to share some great insights from one of our doctors who is actually has their hands dirty in the work every single day. If you're a doctor or a clinician out there listening to this podcast and you're getting value out of it, don't forget to share it with your friends and colleagues, as well as making sure you subscribe so you can make sure you're getting notified when we release our brand new episodes. And today we're going to talk about how to have clinical excellence be your competitive edge in a world that is very competitive nowadays, whether it be you're fighting against the guy down the corner or from the do-it-yourself at home kits that are being thrown out there or any other type of competition. This is going to be the place where you're going to learn about that. And how you're going to learn about that is through our special guest today, Dr. Scott Frey. Scott, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're excited about listening to your experience and what you're able to help others out there that might be struggling a little bit or maybe just want to get another perspective on their practice ownership. Before we do, as we always do on our show, we love to start with the story of how did you get involved in this crazy world of what you do. And as you might know or might not know, there are people listening to this show from all walks of practice life. They could be chiropractors, they could be dentists, orthodontists, plastic surgeons, but we'd love to hear your story. So tell us a little bit about you and how you got into this world.
Thank you. Well, I kind of grew up in an orthodontic family, and my father's an orthodontist. My brother also happens to be an orthodontist as well. It's just kind of one foot in front of the other, going through, high school and college, and with a very strong interest in the healthcare field. And, just the dental profession, seems, when I talk to different, doctors and dentists out there, everyone seemed to be extremely happy. Certainly my father was extremely happy, working in this field. And I knew I wanted to work in healthcare, and this is just a really rewarding, profession to be in. So basically, the usual stuff: dental school, orthodontic residency, graduate. And, I worked with family for a while, but I wanted to go out and kind of do my own thing. So I purchased into a practice down here in Norfolk, Virginia, which has been really, really great. By the water, fabulous practice, fabulous partner that, that I work with, and we work, probably a few times a month now together in the same office. It's great to kind of, have somebody to come into the office and kind of pal around with a little bit. So it's not just you and the teeth, and the team every day. But it's just been really great overall.
That's awesome. You having that legacy of service through orthodontics, I think, is really powerful. I often hear the different stories, right? It's either you grew up in a family that was focused on it, maybe you grew up around it, whether it be dentistry or something like that in the healthcare, or you had some event happen to you where it was powerful, maybe got an accident, your teeth got knocked out, the orthodontist helped you or whatever, right? Or it just like, I fell into it. And I love hearing these legacy stories around that. Do you remember a time when you were younger, because obviously, even though it was in your family, you had to see the benefit of it, right? Do you remember a time where you saw something happening with your dad, or you heard a story where you went, that's why I want to do that?
Well, I worked in the practice when I was young, so I kind of got to see a lot of that firsthand.
Nice.
It was like locked in the basement, basically tracing steps and all that kind of stuff. I got to come into the office during the summer and, help out. I was very, big into soccer. So there wasn't, as I got older, that kind of, dissipated a bit, but, it was great. Everybody was happy, everybody was smiling, and you could make these really impactful changes in people's lives through the power of a smile. So, it's certainly something that I experienced firsthand kind of growing up. And then as I'm making that kind of choice between, different aspects of healthcare, I didn't really see myself doing anything else, to be honest. So.
But you've also been able to see the evolution of the practice. You mentioned, being stuck in the basement and doing,
Yeah.
old school forms of ortho. So you've seen that evolution and the power of what can happen through that evolution if you choose to.
Yeah, and it's certainly changed a whole lot. And some of I didn't really kind of cover it in my intro, but as I was getting out of residency, I had done some speaking for therapeutic injectables while I was in a residency in Colorado, and I was pushed by some people, prominent names in the field like David Sarver, David Paquette, to get out there and kind of share some of these cutting edge techniques and things that I saw as kind of coming down the road, and that kind of just snowballed into some things that we do with Henry Schein, some things that I do with Invisalign, Form Labs, and Sprint Ray as a clinical advisor there, and 3D printing, and that's kind of the big driver right now. If you look at the 3D printing technology, that's really fueled a whole lot of change in the industry. Invisalign's the biggest customer and has been for a long time.
Sure.
So that's been disrupting, the orthodontic specialty for a while. But now we have, the aligners in a box model and all that kind of stuff that's out there. That's it's always keeping things interesting, and it's fun to wake up every day and not have it be the exact. It's like Groundhog Day or something like that. Something different every day. So.
Well, I think that's a really great perspective, right? That every day, every patient is a new opportunity, new challenge. Everybody's different, right? And as a leader, how do you present that, or actually, exemplify that to your team members? Because you've seen the team members who just come in, feel like it's same thing, same day. How do you share that enthusiasm or that outlook with your team?
Well, when we do, quarterly meetings and, get a chance to sit down and kind of go over some different things that we're doing in the practice, we always have, one or two team members come up and present on a case that they either removed the aligners, we call it a removal. You're not really removing anything because it's already removable, but an Invisalign case we finished up, a braces case that we finished up, and they get to take ownership of it. They've probably seen them for at least a good number of the appointments, at least the big one at the end. But,
sure.
They get to share that, and we get to see that evolution of that patient and that huge change that we've been able to produce. So that's really kind of a cool way that we can tap into that. Simply reviewing the records at the chair with the patient and looking back at where they've come from, how much.
Yeah, that whole sphere, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's constant reinforcement, and it's really, really incredibly powerful with a team to be able to see that.
That's great. I love it. I have a mentor who says, people support what they help create.
Yep.
And so to have them show the evidence of what they were able to help create, it's going to help them even more support it. That's great. Well, I'm assuming then that that's part of the way that you create the clinical excellency in what you do, right? And making sure that you are at the top of the game and all the team around you is at the top of their game.
Yeah, and that's, with I guess the title that we've kind of selected for the talk today, I think that kind of gets overlooked. A lot of these young doctors, they get out of school, they've got lots of student debt. They're so focused on these numbers all the time. And they think that the key to kind of opening the door to an incredibly successful practice is some sort of business trick or sleight of hand or scripting or something like that, instead of, really just doing right by the patient and, executing on a clinical level, at a very high clinical level. So, I think, for us and kind of where we found success is the fact that, when you have a very high level of clinical aptitude and you've got the ability to execute efficiently, more efficiently than perhaps your competition, with a wider variety of different tools and tricks that we have up our sleeve clinically, that gives you a lot of latitude to really shape that patient experience around what they're looking to get out of orthodontic treatment. So, if you've only got one way to treat a patient and the patient wants to receive care in a different manner, or experience that care in a different way, you're really not going to be able to get them to say yes to treatment to begin with, and then the business doesn't grow. So, I think that for the young doctors that are out there who, are kind of in my generation, I would really encourage them to take a look at building their assets as much as possible clinically, so that way they can make the business part of their day a lot easier to execute with.
Well, I know everybody's different, but what have been some of the tools that you've used to make sure that you are growing that muscle, if you will, around the clinical excellence?
Well, there's, we're constantly on the hunt for, new things. As a speaker for Invisalign, we're obviously very comfortable with clear aligner therapy. I also speak on digital technology and 3D printing. That's huge for retention, for also sorts of, limited types of care to come down market and kind of offer a variety of different outcomes for patient at competitive price points. Offering, therapeutic injectables in our practice to avoid jaw surgery for, our adult patients, to avoid muscular problems and control those muscular problems with things like Botox and dermal fillers. It allows us to shape a much better smile, to avoid major surgeries and kind of have a more conservative approach. And, most people are unaware of the orthodontist being kind of the first person to make any major decisions about how someone's face is going to be kind of shaped, either as an adolescent going into adulthood, or the impact that we can have with our adult patients. So that's something where we're the prime mover in that space, and we need to take better ownership of certain things that, we may have looked at just as an obstacle before, because there's tools out there that allow us to do our job better and kind of finish the soft tissue, so to speak. So those kind of things are where, we've kind of looked. I'm also the developer of a photobiomodulation device that intraorally allows us to, move teeth, a lot more comfortably, and, just kind of enhance orthodontic tooth movements and do some whitening and things like that. So there is, all sorts of things and areas where we can constantly look to develop an understanding of that, become an expert in that area, and then apply it either clinically or in the marketplace itself.
Do you gravitate towards those tools because it's the thing that, you enjoy doing the most? Have you found it the most gratifying, maybe the best business strategy? Why did you choose those areas to gravitate towards?
Honestly, it's when the technology is kind of ready and mature. I'm always looking, and, I had been looking, before we implemented any sort of 3D printing, and my partner happened to have like a 3D printer in his practice. So it was very easy for us to evolve that and really kind of scale up those types of, operations within our lab. Basically, the 3D printing space used to be very, very expensive. And, you look at maybe 6 years ago, the only thing that was, and that's not even that long, really.
Yeah, right.
It's the only thing that was available in the dental world that could execute, some 3D printing was like the Stratasys machine, which is a $40,000, $50,000 that object machine. And, there was a lot of speculation. I looked at it and we said, all right, well, we have these scanners. We've had them for probably, 10 years, 12 years or so. We know we're capturing the 3D digital information. And the only way we can do anything with it is by sending it to a third party. And, if I simply want to reproduce that just for a retainer, I can't even do it without involving a third party or purchasing a very, very expensive piece of equipment. So when I looked at the trends in the market and how the price points were going to come down, I said to myself, there's, maybe some kind of, I started out with some kind of like hobbyist 3D printers. You get these parts, you get a projector, you get all these other, a motor and all this stuff to kind of move this build platform to kind of, MacGyver together this 3D printing device that's going to cure this resin. So It was cheap at the time, but it wasn't very scalable in operations, but it got us familiar. And then when we went ahead and saw that the price point came down to, under $10,000 and under $5,000, we jumped on those printers to be able to kind of expand things quite a bit. Once it was at that $10,000 price point, the ROI and the payback period was, very, very short.
Right.
And the ROI was huge. So, even for things like retention, where you're not doing any sort of active movement like someone like Invisalign might be doing with 3D printing, or Smile Direct Club might be doing with 3D printing, or Candid, or any of these other companies that kind of use that technology.
Right.
Basically, it was a very, very good tool to have in the practice at that point.
It's interesting. I remember I walked into one of my doctor's offices probably about a year ago, and he has a 3D printing lab. He's got like 3 or 4 different 3D printers and stuff. But he pointed over to the corner of this lab, and he said, "See that thing over there?" And it looked like a mini refrigerator.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, that's my very first one 5 years ago. It cost me 30 grand. And now I have this one cost me 3. This was 4. And now he's doing double the work or triple the work or whatever." Yeah. So it's pretty interesting to watch.
Well, yeah, it was very expensive to get into. Fortunately I caught it. It was a lot more work, but now all the printers out there, everything that's out there on the market is very affordable, which is great.
Fascinating. It's fascinating to see, like you said, it was 6 years ago when this is happening, right? 10 years ago, no one was even thinking about this. And what does 6 years from now look like is going to be the interesting thing.
Oh yeah. I could speculate on that if you want, but
yeah, please.
I think when you look at what's going to be happening in the practice, and practices all over the country, you look at, kind of this automation that's going to be coming from, for lack of a better term, AI. I hate that term because it's so cliche and
makes you think of Terminator.
Everybody using it and all that kind of stuff. But, in the same way that we went from, this 0 prescription bracket in orthodontics, where the orthodontist had to bend these like pretzely wires to get the teeth to move, through data mining, essentially, and Larry Andrews' practice, who kind of invented this straight wire appliance, for those who don't know. He looked at all these bends that he would make with his wires, and he said, all right, well, I'm going to engineer that into a bracket system to standardize things and make, with these 14 different kind of prescriptions, something that's going to take less chair time, be more kind of quote automated, and augment my clinical ability as an orthodontist to deliver great smiles. So we're on the forefront of kind of some digital automation now.
Sure.
With data collection, and obviously Invisalign's been executing that in a phenomenal way, because it allows us to do clear aligner therapy very scalably. But we're going to find that there's going to be tools. We look at what dental monitoring has right now. Some of these up and coming companies, you have a device now that can capture, either 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional information, or 2-dimensional converted over to 3-dimensional information, to basically identify problems. And then once those problems are identified and they have enough of a database there, to create clinical preferences and recommendations. Now, those clinical recommendations right now exist in the form of some automated responses back to patients. So that way the technician's not constantly involved.
Sure.
But if you think about it, someone could walk in tomorrow into a practice, and those recommendations, instead of being to the patient, go to your technician or your chair side to avoid having the doctor having to come to the chair to advise them. Automating things in that fashion, making smarter decisions, about what wire should go in, when a bracket should be repositioned, to trim down the overall treatment time and reduce the amount of friction and effort in that process. So I think that's kind of where things are coming. And there's other things with training and kind of consistency there, and making the appliances and the process a little bit smarter, and that gives you better access to a labor pool and all sorts of things like that. But I think that's kind of the next wave of what's coming out there. So
that's awesome. That's great. It's exciting. I think it's a very exciting time to be in this industry, and I get to just watch it from the periphery, right? But I get to be like, wow, that's cool. That's neat there. And, I'm already at the point where I talk to my wife or my friends about it, family members, and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, but it's really exciting to watch and see, and see what's going on there. So let's talk a little bit about how you feel that excellence that you have striven for in your own life, and then also in your practice, how that's giving you that competitive edge. And I talk about competition quite a bit, in the sense of really believe the most competition is actually the competition that's between your ears, right? The gray matter that's between your ears. But obviously, knowing that you are excellent at what you do, I call it being the best in the world at what you do, knowing that and walking in those footsteps every day, knowing that you have that confidence, how has that helped you create more of a competitive edge, even if it's in your own mind or with your team or actually with your patients?
Well, honestly, I think there's a complacency that kind of comes with, being out in front in some of the things too. And when you talk about the competition in your own head, it takes a lot of work to change things. It's a constant kind of iterative process that we have with our team.
Yep.
They get burnt out on it. Sometimes I feel like I burn my partner out on it a little bit, trying to adjust things. But, I think there needs to be a healthy fear behind, what you're doing, or some sort of process that's driving you, because, you could very easily just keep things exactly the same. And, that's comfortable and it's fine. But it may not be sustainable long term. So I think that, being constantly suspicious of that, complacency in yourself, and looking for opportunities, and then kind of working back to determine the best way to kind of connect the dots to where you think things are going to be, and do so in an affordable fashion. Because it's very easy to throw out $40,000, $50,000 on the front end and hit that 3D printing market, for instance, too soon. And then you're sitting there and waiting. But, kind of timing the market a little bit better to kind of get things down to that price point and then entering. But if I have built some kind of core and fundamental skills ahead of time, I think is important. And, sometimes we do this very effectively. Sometimes it's, a little bit more stressful than it needs to be. But I think nimble practices that have a culture where, businesses that have a culture where their employees are capable of absorbing change, dealing with change, are going to thrive when times get tough. So, that kind of thing, we're in a military area here, so we have a lot of new people coming in and out. Mm-hmm. And, if every new employee, if everything's kind of the same and kind of, easy and comfortable, we may lose that culture going forward. And we constantly have to push ourselves just a little bit to kind of keep that as part of the process. And I think that, that you lose that competitive edge very quickly if you're not constantly, competing with yourself. And, we look at, we talk about competition. You're absolutely right. It's not like looking over in the next lane to try and figure out, what they're doing. Like, you're competing with yourself to make yourself better constantly. And, that's really where people need to be focused.
And it's fascinating, right? Because you only grow and you only learn when you're irritated or when you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I have this visual in the head. I'm actually going to probably have a graphic designer make this sometime for one of my slides about the falsehood of comfortableness. And, couches were not made to make people get in shape.
Yeah.
Right? Like the point of a couch is to be comfortable.
Yeah.
But if you had a couch that had like a little pokey things on it, or every once in a while just poked at you, it'd be uncomfortable. You'd probably get off the couch more often and not binge watch all those shows, right? Or whatever. But it's the same thing with your team members being uncomfortable, letting them know that, hey, you get it. Not everybody's comfortable shaking hands with every single person that walks in, or actually asking more questions than just how are you doing. It is uncomfortable, but that's what creates that excellence. And you've shown that obviously in the clinical side of what you do, of always have a desire to learn and to grow and know that there's always another level you can get to. Yeah. It's very, very important. Well, let me ask you this. We love to focus on in this show, the fact that, look, you're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur, you're out there striving to do really great work, change people's lives, literally change people's lives through what you do, and give them a new outlook on their smile, on the way that they can connect with people. But every business has challenges. Every single business, my business, every person listening to this has a challenge in their business. What's a challenge that you're facing in your business right now that you come up against?
I think, there's always like a few things kind of bouncing around. Sometimes, the work, expands so much during the day that building building the systems and kind of making sure that the training of the employees is not so tribal and it's systematic.
Mm.
and
Love that word.
scalable is that's where I think we kind of struggle a little bit with things, and that's not a new problem.
Yeah.
We've always got ways that we think we're handling it really well, and then it's kind of like almost like whisper down the alley, like unless everybody's in one big room and we're not always together, so they'll hear one thing, and then that gets passed along through the team instead of everyone talking about it as a big group.
Telephone game.
Yeah, and it's not that anyone said anything incorrect or anything like that, but the how and the details sometimes of how you want something to be executed are not immediately obvious of what level you need to provide. So like, let's say we come up with some sort of like triage sheet for how we want something handled on the phones, right? And there may be something that we just didn't even know we need to provide guidance on that's left out, and people insert their what they heard about the process into that, and whether they heard it directly or indirectly becomes I guess a source of variance that sometimes it's good. That's great, and people outperform kind of what we're currently doing, and other times it's not so great, but we want to kind of limit that a little bit, and it's changing as much as we do. That's part of we just got to be able to find the time to spend on that, and it's so hard sometimes to get that time, because there's so many patients that want to come in and see us, and if we have to kind of shut down to do that, it's a very difficult decision to make, and sometimes we swing back and forth on how often we want to do that.
Well, it's interesting. First of all, I love the word that you said about tribal learning, right? Where you get together and it's like, okay, just got everyone get together, and tribal learning as opposed to a systematic way of doing it. I was interviewing someone else earlier on this topic of finding time, right? And she has found actually it was yesterday, she has found that like they literally dedicate 1 day a week, 2 hours in the morning. It's every Wednesday, I think it is. That's training day. That's it. Like, and they don't start their day till 10 o'clock or whatever. And it has made all the difference because you're sharpening that saw, right? You're not just going at it every single day and with the dull blade, you're sharpening that saw. So dedicating that time obviously is very important. I was going to ask you, do you guys use recordings as a way of training?
We do. We've got varying levels of aptitude with computers and technology. So we do use some screen recordings and screen capture sometimes. There's other things that I would love to just capture, just like with a camera or something, just on some great employees doing what they do, to kind of capture that all the time. We're going to probably have to make some equipment purchases and things like that. A lot of it's still written and kind of pictures and things. But I think video would be a really great addition for us. And the question is, the problem becomes, that time, that 2 hour training time, right? Someone's got to create the content to train on. And then where do we get that person's time, and where do we get, time freed up for that individual or that team to do what they need to do without having them do it outside of work? Because certainly I'll work after hours, because our business, the doctors will put in that extra time.
Sure. But I don't want you doing it, right? Because you don't need another job.
Exactly, right? I'd be out of the clinic doing just that. If that was the case. So we've got to free up time for employees as well, and making it, I think video is just it captures what we need in less time. Instead of writing something up, because you can do it live, you can chop it up and kind of edit it.
It's really easy to renew it and get a new perspective on it. I would highly recommend a couple of things. I love this aspect. I mean, we're in such a great digital age, right? And you talk about that clinical excellence of, if there's a clinical thing that you want somebody to see how you want to do it differently, maybe it's the way they're placing brackets or whatever, throwing that GoPro camera on your head and having them hear you and see you do it, right? Perfect, right? Then we watch that over and over again. But I always love the idea of onboarding people, right? When you onboard people to your clinic or want them to do it a certain way, and record the best person in your office doing it. Like you said, bring out your cell phone. Cell phones have great cameras. Bring out your cell phone, just have it up there. And when she comes back, or let's just say Becky comes back and says, how did you say to do that thing again? Go watch the video. And just watch the video. It's right there. It's online. It's that you don't have to repeat it again or whatever. And then the other thing is I am a big fan of not just recording so you can use it for those trainings, but for me to hear myself, whether it be a phone call, 10 different phone calls that I had to hear myself. So I go, oh, I totally missed her question there. Or, oh, what was I saying? That wasn't even correct, right? I hear myself doing that. Security cameras, great way to, with your team members, right? To like, you see how you approach that person here? You didn't say that there. So I'm a huge fan of that. So if you can implement that and use your admin days, use an extra day, 1 day a month where you can say, hey, okay, I'm going to give you some extra hours to come and create that. But I do not want you creating that, right? Yeah. You don't need another job.
We've gotten some, but it's like not we're going to have to switch over a lot of those written manuals into to videos. And, it's definitely something we're working on.
I'm telling you, I've had a conversation with a guy who's a professional videographer. Is like, dude, you should create a package where you go to offices and like a reality show, right? Where you're just following them around and then that way you can chop it all up for him. Say, well, here's how you did this. Here you had this. That'd be pretty interesting. I don't know, maybe I'll have to make that someday. Well, thank you for sharing that challenge with everybody, because everybody has challenges and I want everybody to know you're not alone. Well, we've come to a place in our show, Scott, where we go through our 6 questions, which are our rapid fire questions, where we get to hear just what's at the top of your mind on our 6 questions we ask. You willing to play?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Very cool. Out of all the things that you learned in school, what do you feel is the one thing you wish they would have taught you back in school?
Amortization tables, things like that. Honestly, all of this stuff, like the amount of, we're constructing a new office right now, and the architects, the contractors, everybody's done a great job, and just these weird details that are, you just kind of take for granted. It would be nice to, the business education is the one thing that, they just don't cover in school. And it's trial and error. And I don't know there's a better way to do it, to be honest, but it's, it's on the job learning with everything.
It really is. You're absolutely right. Is there a book that you feel every private practice owner should be reading or should have read?
I would say Lean Startup.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. And is that what's the main thing that you took away from that book?
Well, that book, I think it talks a lot about uncertain markets. And, when you have an existing model for something, right, it's very easy. Like if I want to open a coffee shop, right, I know there's floor plans probably available, where you purchase beans, what equipment to have, the relative cost, or an ice cream shop. Really any of these things, like they're the same thing. You can do it, right? But, with an orthodontic practice or something, a lot of businesses in general, like when that model is changing a lot, it becomes uncertain. And you don't really, applying the same old model to what's going forward, I don't think is a really good way to work things. And the theme of that book is how, with an uncertain market, how do you approach it? Because you don't have an existing model for what you're doing.
Right.
So I think that's a very good, book.
That's great. We'll make sure we put that in the show notes, a link of that to the show notes. That's great. Before we go on to the next question, how can listeners reach out to you?
I might give out my email on the air. Honestly, they're going to blow it up. The best way, let's do this.
Yeah.
Reach out to me on Facebook so I can say who you are, seeing you beforehand. Just friend me on Facebook. That's probably, I hate Facebook with a passion, but it's the way everybody kind of gets in touch and communicates. I know that if I talk too close to my phone, I'm going to start getting ads for things and all that. That's probably the best way. Look me up on Facebook.
It's
That's
so true.
probably
What you just said there is so true. My wife and I talk about this all the time. We're like, we literally were just talking about this, and now we've got all these ads popping up.
yeah.
Everybody has that
Yeah,
experience.
it's when you listed out all the different kind of people that's going to be tuning into this
Uh-huh.
this podcast here. I was just going to give out my personal email, but I think Facebook is probably
Facebook's great.
it's a better way.
Yeah, I have a lot of people who do Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever they're on there. Like then way you can filter it a little bit more.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, in my book, The Practice RX, I focus a lot on team culture and team performance as the foundation to business growth. What do you see as the biggest challenge that private practice owners are facing with their teams and their office culture in today's environment?
I would say, and doing, speaking to, doctors and kind of getting outside my own bubble is very, very helpful. I think that a lot of times that I see in offices as kind of being a hindrance is honestly just unwillingness to make a change. It's for whatever reason, there's this very dogmatic kind of approach of this is how the way things are done. And,
Yes.
when you bring in team members, a fresh set of eyes can produce some change. And I think, in the orthodontic, specialty, when we have partnerships and associateships and doctors buying one practice and another, when you change things, they're kind of used to that culture where things don't change a whole lot. And when you kind of flip it to the other side, people are gonna, want to get off the bus, and that's fine.
It's great.
But I think that doctors, especially in, who have associates or who have partners, and you're not just the only person in the office, you've got to, that associateship and that partnership is not going to be effective if the other party is not allowed to change. And I talk to people who they were like, well, I worked in this practice for a long time, and the doctor, they brought me on and they had all these expectations, but they never changed anything. It was the same way. And you can't get growth without making some changes. You can't, expect different results without making a change, for lack of a better word. But, sometimes, that's prevented from a top-down level. And I think one of the reasons why, my partnership, is working out well, and I wanted to have, somebody, I'm not from the Virginia area, somebody where I would be working alongside with them, 50-50 owners for quite some time. I think it works great, but, I could have bought something that was, outright, but I just saw something. It was a great opportunity that kind of like fell in my lap, and we talked for a long time, and, allowing each other some space to kind of make changes have been very, very important. And, certainly, there's always friction in that process. Like, we'll say, hey, this is kind of maybe moving too fast or too slow, and have that talk every now and then. But we still, circle back to saying, all right, well, we've got to allow ourselves some space to change things, so that way we can continue to grow and continue to kind of cultivate that team culture that's going to allow us to be nimble and successful.
Well, I think that's so important, right? Because Brene Brown talks about in Dare to Lead, that ability to rumble with one another, right?
Yeah.
That's so key.
Well, it's funny. So we are like, they did, Benson and Clark did our like valuation, and they do like a Kobe analysis or something like that. And it was nice because like, it was, I filled in gaps where he was like low, and he filled in where I was low. And it was like,
got that yin and yang going on.
Yeah, it's perfect because, if we have the exact same personality type, unless we are in complete agreement, we're just it's going to create more friction than it needs to. So.
And I bet you're growing faster because of it, and that you guys complement each other. It's a great marriage, if you will, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's definitely, he's my work wife, or vice versa, whatever the
work husband
normative thing is now. So, but yeah, it's, my life partner, let's call it that.
There you go. Well, speaking of advice, what's the best advice that you've ever received in your life or business?
I would say Art Dugoni. He was the former dean at University of Pacific. It wasn't directly to me; it was directed at the incoming class. And it was basically always build your assets. So it's not a static process. You just constantly accumulating new knowledge, new tools, new skills. That part of how we need to approach life, and also our practices, that's really, no truer words have been said, out there. And it's just been really phenomenal advice. And, I've tried to follow it as best as I could. And, when I am, it's definitely, rewarding.
Well, it's so true, right? It's you are the most important asset in your practice. So always be growing those assets and for you and for your practice. So last question, what is the best resource or tool that every private practice owner should be using to grow their practice?
Ah, man, resource or tool. I would tell you right now, just honestly, just measuring things in your practice, and taking a look,
Yeah.
it's that simple. You don't really know how you're doing unless you really, work on the business and take a look under the hood.
Yep.
There's a lot of different stuff that we can measure. Everybody wants to look at different things, but, just pay attention. You'll notice some things, people on the team may notice some things. So, it works out.
Performance improves where performance is measured. Absolutely, 100%. Wow, Dr. Scott Frey, thank you so much for this amazing conversation and all the knowledge that you've been able to dump on us today. I mean, I really think that when we look back at what we were able to talk about, everything from getting out of your comfort zone and focusing on that clinical excellence, helping your team rise to the excellence level, being willing to see the evolution of the practice for what it is, not just what you've come from, especially somebody like you who've been in this industry for a long time. You're one of those legacy players, if you will, because of your family. And then also being able to look forward to what's going to be happening and embracing that. I really, really appreciate it. I know people got tons of nuggets out of this. I appreciate it a lot.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on. And, it's always fun to chat. Last time I saw you was at the PCSO there when, you were speaking. So
yeah.
It was great.
I'll be there again this year. I'll be emceeing that whole thing again this year. Well, I look forward to seeing you there and look forward to seeing you in other places as well. And for those of you that are listening, please reach out through Facebook. And if you have any questions for Dr. Frey, and thank you again for being a listener to the Propreneur Podcast, where our goal always is to help you be more proactive, productive, and profitable in all areas of your life and business. And remember, if you enjoy what you heard today or in any of our podcasts, make sure you share it with your friends and colleagues and subscribe. Thank you so much, everybody. We will see you on the next episode. Thanks so much again for listening to the Propreneur Podcast. We really appreciate your support. If you haven't subscribed already, please make sure you do so. Also, if you feel like you might be a good fit for our podcast as a guest or know somebody who you think would be, go ahead and email us at dino@dinowatt.com. Again, thanks for support. We'll see you on the next episode.